Hi there, I'm Laura Tillinghast, and I made this video to show you how I photograph couples in love. Let's get started and talk first about posing and composition. Starting with this image, what we have here is a very attractive couple, but overall this photo is kind of blah, so let's talk about how we could improve it. When you ask two people to go and stand by a wall, they're generally not going to know what else to do but to just stand by the wall. So one thing that I do that really puts couples at ease right away is I have them lean against the wall. So with one partner leaning up against or having their back against the wall, not only does it immediately change their posture and make them look more at ease, it gives a convenient place for the other partner to also lean against them, and this creates a really cute portrait. So when we look side by side, there's really no contest that the image on the right is more intimate and they even look happier in the photo. Now you might be asking yourself, why did I include all this negative space to the left? I always like to include at least one shot like this because you never know what the couple's going to need for something like a save the date card, wedding invitations, etc. And a great thing about this kind of pose is that I will shoot it horizontally and then turn my camera and I can shoot a couple vertical, more intimate portraits, and I get, two birds with one stone. They have the images they need for design, and we also have some tight portraits as well. Here we have a similar issue where the pose is just not great. It's important to realize that when you do engagement portraits or portraits of someone who is having an anniversary, they're generally not models in their spare time, and they're looking to us for the expertise of how to pose in front of the camera. However, we can't just have our subjects lean against a wall in every image. So here's an example of where I have turned one subject into a virtual wall, and as soon as they put their arms around the other person and the other subject's leaning against them as though they're the wall, they're both much more at ease. So comparing them, the image on the left looks like these two might be brother and sister, whereas on the right it's obvious that they're a couple in love. Another fun and romantic pose I like to do when subjects are similar in height is to have them slightly face each other and then clasp their hands in front. This way their bodies actually form a heart. Oh, how romantic. Now this image has a totally different look and feel. After a while, I get real tired of photographing people just in standing up poses, so one thing I like to do is have one partner sit and the other one sit on their lap or sit next to them, and this brings their heads closer together and you can get a really nice tighter portrait that has a totally different feel to it. And in this pose I can often get a really touching and heartwarming candid moment when I allow them to sit there long enough and I might futz with the camera. They get a little bored, they'll start talking and looking at each other, and I just have to be ready to capture those moments. Here's another example where I kind of let them think that I was messing around with the camera, but I was ready to take a picture when they started talking to each other, and that way you can really capture some genuine moments, and these shots don't look too posy at all. Now the last thing I'm going to mention about posing is that another thing I like to do that really captures the couple in a natural way is to have them just walk. Walk down a hallway, walk across the lawn, but just snap away, and I usually tell them to ignore the camera, just walk like you're on a stroll, and this way you can capture some really pretty images where they aren't posing and they look really natural together. And these shots usually look terrific in black and white. Now I get to talk about my favorite aspect of photography, and that is lighting. Here you see me struggling to photograph this couple in full sun, and they're struggling to keep their eyes open. This results in a very high contrast shot that isn't great. Not only are they squinting, but the overhead light creates pretty unflattering shadows. Here I've moved the couple into some nearby shade so that I can shoot with the same beautiful background, but no longer have to deal with that really harsh overhead light. Within this shady area, the lighting is much more even and flattering, and the resulting image you see here is better overall. Comparing the two, you can see that the frame on the right is a lot more balanced since we aren't dealing with that super harsh overhead sunlight. Here I've taken things a step further by adding a large white reflector below my subjects and in front to bounce more light up into their faces. This additional light adds more dimension and just a better tonal range overall in the final images. Now in this case, it's even more important that I use a reflector because the majority of the sunlight is coming from behind the subjects, leaving their faces a little dark. Looking at it before and after, the image on the left with no reflector shows that the skin tones are going a little muddy, and adding a little light with that bounce reflector on the right brightens the skin tones, and you can see it especially in the female subject because she's closer to it. Another favorite technique of mine is to position subjects right next to the edge of a shady area, and this allows brighter light to gently spill into the frame, creating a gorgeous highlight along the side of the face and the back of the hair. Now let's talk about working with natural light plus added flash. Here you can see that my subjects are standing in pretty deep shade, so I'm going to add just a little bit of external flash to brighten the ambient lighting. Looking at it before and after, while there's nothing technically wrong with the image on the left, I prefer the brighter complexions and overall better tonal range of the image on the right. Now looking at this final image, the way I accomplished this was to shoot with natural light primarily, just like in the previous images, but I also added external flash at a very low setting to just kiss the frame with a little bit of additional light. Here is another example of this. While the image on the left looks okay, I prefer the brightened complexions of the image on the right. Now, zooming in a bit so we can see the eyes, in addition to brightening complexion, this added flash adds more sparkle to the eye with a catch light and minimizes under eye circles, which reduces how much work you have to do later in post-production. Now, speaking of post-production, let's go into that now. Now we're going to jump into Luminar, which is one of my favorite image editing programs. The reason that I like Luminar so much is I can do my raw file processing and my creative edits all in one place and all a lot faster than I was doing them before. Now this is a raw file, so we need to do our basic raw file adjustments first. I'm going to click Add Filters, choose Raw Develop, and then everything I need is going to load over here on the right. Now if you've used Photoshop in the past, what you see here is going to look very familiar. Now first I'm going to start by warming up skin tones. That's looking better already. And this image is slightly overexposed, so I'm going to bring the exposure down just a little. That looks good. Now I can fine tune my highlights, and I do want to bring those down just a little. And I think I'll add a little more contrast to give the image some pop. So very quickly we were able to bring the image from where we started to already a lot closer to a finished product. But now we get to do the real fun part. For the creative edit, I come up here and add a new adjustment layer. And the benefit of doing that is I can keep it separate from our raw develop layer here where we have our basic adjustments. So going to where we're going to do our creative edits, I'm going to click this menu at the top, and that's going to load the presets. Now looking at the categories here, there's lots to choose from. I tend to stick with the presets that are in the portrait category. Now my favorite one to use is Enhanced Portrait, and it really gives the image a lot of punch. There's a vignette that's added to the outside, the saturation is increased, and the overall contrast as well. So if we want to see what our image looked like before we added this preset, we can click over here, turn it on and off, and see how dramatic it is. Looking at it that way, I see that it is pretty strong. So we're going to bring the opacity of that layer down up to about 70%. And now when we turn it off and on, there's a lot more subtle effect, but it's still giving the overall look that I'm going for. Now I can always go back to the raw develop layer and bring that exposure down even more. And then going back and looking at it all put together, that's looking really good. Now if we click up here and look at where we started, it's amazing how quickly we were able to go from the raw unfinished file to the finished product that I delivered to the client. With this video, I hope I've inspired you and given you some ideas to get out there and shoot some romantic portraits of your own. Until next time.